Thank you so much for being here. It is such an honor to be in front of the finest body of men and women in the world, not just in America. You guys are amazing. Thank you so much. And I don't know how I follow the last two speeches. I mean, that's just unbelievable. I just came from Poland, actually. I was there a couple weeks ago, spent a lot of time there. Incredible place. And Bill Jasper is just amazing. So I've had the privilege of working with him a lot. And I talked to him this morning about Trump. So we went through some of this. So I know there's a lot of different opinions about President Trump in this audience and among the Birch Society. I get emails and calls from a lot of members. They say, well, you know, don't you think he might be an agent of the insiders, a part of the conspiracy? And we'll see today. You know, I think there's a lot of evidence to suggest that that's not the case. But we'll take a look here. We'll see what's happening. Obviously, you know, we as constitutionalists, we realize that there's a lot to be desired from a president and from a Congress. Unfortunately, a lot of our countrymen don't yet understand that. But a lot of good things are happening, and I don't think we can overlook that. So let's talk about President Trump. Before he was president, he said a lot of incredible things on the campaign trail. I'm sure some of you heard them as well. Americanism, not globalism, will be our credo. That's amazing. I mean, that is the language of Robert Welch, right? The idea that we as a country need to be involved in Americanism. What did I do here? Messed up the thing. There we go. So that was crazy. I mean, to hear that was like music to my ears, and I know to a lot of the people in this audience too. It was, you know, did he really say that? He talked about Hillary Clinton. Said that she's meeting with international bankers, secretly plotting the surrender of our sovereignty and building global governance. I mean, this is the language of the John Birch Society. This is what we have been saying for 60 years now, right? This is what we have been trying to get out to the American public for 60 years. And I argue that this would not have been possible without the efforts of the John Birch Society. On the campaign trail, he also said things that for a lot of Americans, especially in the fake media, was just flabbergasting. I mean, he might as well have had 3 heads and come from outer space, right? He said, ISIS is honoring President Obama, that he was the co-founder of ISIS, and Hillary was the other co-founder of ISIS. And the media couldn't contain themselves. That's so ridiculous. Where would you get such an idea? And he gave them rope and let them hang themselves for a few days, and then he tweeted out the documents that we have been reporting on in the New American for several years now. Documents showing that the U.S. government at the highest levels had a plan to support al-Qaeda, knowingly trying to create what they described as a Salafist principality in eastern Syria. Most Americans had no idea, right? Most still don't. But Trump said it on the campaign trail and got it into the national headlines. And then after a few days, he tweeted out the information, and that was that. You didn't hear any more whining from the media about how Trump had called Obama the founder of ISIS. Why? Because they might have had to reveal the evidence. So this was incredible. I mean, this was just absolutely incredible to me. What others were saying on the campaign trail. Alex Jones, I know there's sometimes mixed feelings. I think he's woken up a lot of people, and he's been very friendly to the Birch Society over the years, regardless of what you think of his style. He said Trump is more John Birch Society than the John Birch Society. I don't know if I would go that far. But it was interesting. It was a very interesting comment. And he's got a huge audience. You know, millions and millions of people listen to what he has to say. So that was big. That was important. Here, Jeet of Mother Jones, the senior editor of Mother Jones, one of the most left-wing rags in the country, actually said that Trumpism is Bircherism. He said that this whole idea that William Buckley was able to excommunicate the John Birch Society from the conservative movement is ridiculous. The Birchers won, and Trumpism proves it. So whether you agree with him or not, it was a very interesting statement. I think he wishes he hadn't have said that, because I think he thought Trump was going to go down in flames, and now this quote will come back to haunt them for a long time. But it was interesting, and he lied about the John Birch Society in his article. I actually had a dialogue with him trying to get him to correct his lies. He apparently has no moral principles, so he won't. But anyways, that was interesting. That was fascinating. I talked to Roger Stone. I don't know. I know that probably not a lot of people are fans of Roger Stone here, but he's an interesting character. He's got a big tattoo of Nixon on his back. Interesting guy. So, I've had a couple of opportunities to interview him down in Florida, and he has been a very loyal advisor and a friend to President Trump since the 1980s. He was actually the first guy to tell him, hey, you ought to run for president. That'd be a good idea, and you'd win. Right? And people said, oh, that's so silly, no way. And Roger Stone pushed him to do that, served as an advisor for decades and decades. Apparently, they're still pretty close. He told me on video, on camera, that Trump's father was a quiet funder of the John Birch Society and a personal friend of Robert Welch. That was interesting. That was news to me, and very, very interesting. So obviously his dad, had some correct information, and apparently some of that rubbed off on Trump, right? So that was interesting. Roger Stone told me, for what it's worth, that Trump really does intend to drain the swamp, that he's doing his best to do that, and that the establishment, the deep state as it's called today, hates him so much that they will do anything to get rid of him. Whether that means taking him out under the 25th Amendment, declaring him insane, and they tried to do that for a while. Every news outlet in the country, they had every psychiatrist, oh, he's crazy, he's clearly insane, we need to remove him. That didn't work. They're trying to use Robert Mueller, the FBI guy, former FBI guy, to take him down. And then he finally said, if worse comes to worse, they'll try a John F. Kennedy on him, and they'll take him out that way. So, whether you like him or not, we ought to be praying for our president. God says we ought to pray for all of our leaders, and we ought to be praying for President Trump, and that, he would do the right thing, right? We need to be doing that. So what do other people say about him? Well, the establishment absolutely hates him. For those who think that they're acting and that they really don't hate him and it's just a big show for us, I don't think so. I think they really, really hate him. An analysis, did I do it again? There we go. An analysis of the big three networks, the ABC, NBC, CBS, during the election found that more than 90% of the election coverage of President Trump during the election was negative. Unbelievable numbers, unprecedented in American history, right? Just 2 out of the top 100 newspapers endorsed him. They all told us Hillary was going to win anyway, right? The New York Times said the odds were 80% or more. Huffington Post, 98% for sure. Hillary Clinton's going to win. You wonder who they were polling. But anyways, they really don't like him. The CFR, the Council on Foreign Relations, I don't need to tell you guys that, constantly agitating against him. I'm actually working on an article right now. They had an article in Foreign Affairs that just came out a few days ago. They said we need a committee to save the world order from Trump. Right? So, they called for a new organization called the G9, and this will be coming out in the New American soon. You check online, you'll find it. They need a G9 made up of Canada and South Korea and all these others. The purpose of this organization would be to defend the world order, to hold the line until we can get rid of Trump and put somebody else in the White House who will once again take the leadership and the mantle of leadership of the new world order. So that's what they're talking about, openly and publicly. Right? We know that Trump is sitting on top of a bureaucracy that despises him. 70% of what's called the senior executive service. If you guys read the New American regularly, you know what this is because I wrote about it recently. But it's basically the upper echelon of the bureaucracy. Almost impossible to remove these people. And about 70% of them were appointed during the Obama administration. These are the guys that actually run the federal government, right? These are the ones between Trump, the political appointees, and the bureaucracy. These are the ones who actually, I don't know if you guys ever saw that TV show Yes Minister from the 80s in Britain. The minister would give the instructions to the career civil service bureaucrats. They say, yes, minister, and then they'd go off and do exactly what they wanted to do anyway. And that's essentially how things seem to be working in a lot of these federal bureaucracies. So he's up against quite some opposition. Here we have in the New York Slimes, we had an op-ed confirming that there is a deep state. They actually said, this isn't the work of the deep state, it's the steady state, right? So it's just another term for the exact same thing. And what he said was that many of the senior officials in the Trump administration are working against him. They're working to frustrate parts of his agenda. I would know because I'm one of them, this person said. Now, this is in the New York Times, so we need to take it with a grain of salt. It's very possible that they wrote this themselves to try to demoralize the president and his supporters. But if we give them the benefit of the doubt and say this was a real bureaucrat or appointee in the administration, this is very interesting. They said his national security team knows better than him, so they've been overruling him on stuff, Russia and other policies. So this is all very interesting. They're basically bragging in one of the top newspapers in the country that what you people vote for doesn't matter. We know better than you guys. We know better than the elected president, and we'll do whatever we feel like it because that's what's best for everyone. Just another quick graphic illustration of how the bureaucracy despises him. This is a chart that was put together by The Hill. They did an analysis of all the money that was donated to the candidates during the election. More than 95% went to Hillary Clinton. In some of the bureaucracies, like education, these are the people in charge of educating your children, 99.7% of the money went to Hillary Clinton. So That's what he's up against. Here we have these so-called intelligence community people, part of the deep state, right? Not the deep state behind the deep state, but certainly the deep state. This one used to work, high-ranking official in the intelligence community, said, now we go nuclear, right, as Bush would say. The intelligence community has decided that the war is going to go to new levels, and he will die in jail. They're talking about your president. He will die in jail. So that's what these people think. And he said this publicly on Twitter, right? I mean, you can find this still online today. Here you have Chucky Schumer, the senator from New York. And he said on national television with that guy, Rachel Maddow, let me tell you, you take on the intelligence community, and they have 6 ways from Sunday to get back at you. So even for a hard-nosed businessman, he's being really dumb to do this. He was talking about how Trump had stood up to the CIA and some of the elements of the intelligence community. This is incredible stuff. I mean, if we had said this a few years ago, they would have said, oh, there goes those tinfoil hat-wearing John Birchers talking about the intelligence community. You know, here they are saying it on national television. Everybody in Congress seems to know this. The top Democrat talks about it openly on television. They spy on members of Congress, and this has come out in public. So this is incredible. Here we have Newt Gingrich, who is certainly a neoconservative and part of the establishment, saying on Fox News, on national television, you can watch it on YouTube, that the establishment hates Trump because he's an outsider, he's not them, he's not part of the club, he's uncontrollable, and he's not part of their secret societies, and he didn't do their little rituals. So that's interesting. It's interesting. These were some hacked emails out of the Bohemian Grove. I'm sure a lot of you guys know the Bohemian Grove. They get together and they in front of a big stone owl, and they do a cremation of care ceremony. Very bizarre stuff. You can watch it on YouTube if you haven't seen it. But they hacked the emails of some of these guys. Stephen Harper, the Canadian Prime Minister, and Colin Powell. So they hacked Colin Powell's emails, and he had sent an email to his friend up in Canada who was the defense minister, the justice minister, all kinds of different high positions. They said, I'm back from the Bohemian Grove. I sat next to Stephen Harper, the Canadian Prime Minister, and we had a nice discussion. Grove attendees know that Trump is a disaster. So this was before he was actually elected president. But so the secret societies know that they don't like him. The CFR knows that they don't like him. The bureaucracy doesn't like him. So, if he really was part of the deep state trying to pull a fast one on us, I don't suppose we would see this kind of stuff. So, but could Trump be a stooge of the New World Order? And I know there are people in the Birch Society who think that's a very real possibility. And I can't rule it out completely. I don't know all things, but I think the evidence is very interesting, and I think we ought to look at it. So is Trump a puppet of the New World Order? Well, there are some very troubling things coming out of the Trump administration. Most recently, we saw the new NAFTA, right? I'm sure if you guys read the New American, you saw the fantastic articles by my friend Christian Gomez. Unbelievable, right? This is a betrayal of the highest order. This is worse than the original NAFTA, right? I mean, they snuck part of the TPP in here. They're going to create all these North American bureaucracies. We're still going to keep the kangaroo tribunals with international bureaucrats that can overrule us, our state governments, our federal government. We're going to surrender Congress's constitutional authority over trade to trilateral commissions, right? This is absolutely crazy. So strike one for President Trump, right? That's not good. What happens from here, we don't know. There was a good article in the New American now about the second highest ranking Republican in the Senate saying that there's no guarantee they're going to pass this monstrosity. So that's good. And does Trump really know everything that's in this? I don't know. My guess would be no. We know the lead negotiator, Robert Lighthizer, is a member of the Council on Foreign Relations. We'll talk about him in a little bit. So there are some of these deep state people within his administration. No doubt about it. Trump is still running around the world droning people without any semblance of constitutional authority. No jury, no trial, no even criminal charges. Just you put them on a list, some bureaucrat in Washington, and boom, we blow them up with their family. That's un-American and that's wrong. And Trump has continued this policy from the Obama era and from the Bush era. So strike two, right? We've got a couple strikes here. Massive budgets. He keeps signing these absolutely ridiculous, he calls them ridiculous budgets, insane budgets, filled with unconstitutional stuff. Republicans are running Congress and the White House, and still we're funding Planned Parenthood. This is crazy, right? So strike three against President Trump. But is he out? I don't know. It's for you guys to decide. As you all know, the John Birch Society doesn't endorse candidates. But again, I think we should look at the evidence, and I think we should look at it honestly and objectively. And these are troubling things, no doubt about it, right? These bills he's been signing with all this funding, it's funding a lot of unconstitutional programs. And we in the John Birch Society know that that's not right. And we need to be working on stopping these things, including the new NAFTA, the USMCA, the U.S.-Mexico-Canada Trade Agreement. Oh, and I forgot to mention, of course, the G20, right? Betsy DeVos, the education secretary, just went down to the G20, signed up to a deal that said basically we're going to have total globalized education. Your kids are all going to learn about how wonderful the UN is and globalism and social and emotional learning. So we're going to continue with the massive federally led, United Nations-backed brainwashing of all of our children. This is very, very troubling for a president who runs around saying we don't like globalism, we want Americanism. But it's only part of the picture, right? This is not the entire picture when it comes to President Trump. So I'd like to just run through some of the things here. Oh, they fixed my slide. That was really nice of you guys. Thank you. This looks so much better than what I had. But here's some of the globalists and deep staters within the Trump administration. Robert Lighthizer, the U.S. Trade Representative, member of the Council on Foreign Relations. He's the guy who just came up with this disastrous trilateral so-called free trade agreement with Mexico and Canada. We have Elaine Chao, Transportation Secretary, also a member of the Council on Foreign Relations. Now, I've heard this one explained away. Well, you know, Trump wanted to get some of his better picks approved in the Senate. Mitch McConnell is married to Elaine Chao, and so, you know, you got to throw the dogs a bone, or they'll hold up everybody. You'll never have anybody in your cabinet. So, you know, whether that's true or not, I don't know. He's got John Bolton, right? And John Bolton talks like an anti-globalist, but he's a member of the Council on Foreign Relations, and he loves these unconstitutional wars, so this is problematic. H.R. McMaster, the previous National Security Advisor, also a globalist, went to Bilderberg, member of the Council on Foreign Relations, working at George Soros-funded think tanks, plotting more globalism. And if you guys remember, before these two globalist characters here, he actually had a much better guy, General Kelly. Or excuse me, not General Kelly, General Flynn. Oh my goodness, brain freeze. But yeah, General Flynn. And General Flynn was not part of these things. In fact, he had done a lot of the work exposing the Obama administration's policy of supporting Al-Qaeda in Libya and Syria. So I think he was a decent guy, and I think that's why the deep state took him out so quickly. Justice Gorsuch. You know, whether he's going to be a good justice or not, I don't know, but he was a member of the Council on Foreign Relations at one time. We have the membership records proving it. He's not anymore, for what it's worth, but he was at one time. Here's some other ones. Dina Habib-Powell, she's now gone, but she was Deputy National Security Advisor, member of the CFR, member of the Trilateral Commission. We have Rick Perry, she went to Bilderberg. We have, is that time clock frozen? We have Rick Perry in the Energy Department, which he once promised he was going to abolish. And he has been to Bilderberg. We have Wilbur Ross, the Commerce Secretary, literally worked in a high-ranking position for the Rothschilds, right? If you guys know the Rothschilds, you know they are big, deep state people, right? You have James Mattis, the Defense Secretary, has been to Bilderberg. You have Steve Mnuchin, Treasury Secretary, was a member or is a member of the Skull and Bones Secret Society with the Bushes and John Kerry and all the rest of these guys. So we have a number of these people in the administration who are very troubling. Now, I'll be the first to say it's a lot less than Obama had, it's a lot less than Bush had, it's a lot less than Clinton had, and that's refreshing. Guys, I am wondering how much time I have left, just so I know whether I need to speed up or slow down. So if it would be possible to have a more accurate count, that would be really good. So now let's look at actions, not words, right? Aside from some of his appointees, he is and has been exiting globalist organizations that are crucial to this little new world order they want to build. He's been tackling the suicidal trade policies with China. Some of these are existential issues, right? America cannot continue to survive as a free and independent nation if we don't deal with these. The immigration tsunami, right? Trump is doing his best to get a handle on this in the face of a hostile Congress, a hostile media that says any immigration control is racism, sexism, xenophobia, all the rest of it. He's been exposing the lying media. You know, who would have thought that in our lifetimes, only 6% of Americans would say they have real trust in the media? Less than, 14% of Republicans say they have any trust left in the media. This is huge, right? Without their propaganda organs, the deep state cannot continue to manipulate the American people. Now, it's true that, you know, the American people don't necessarily know where to go to get the real news, but they know not to believe the garbage on the television. This is huge progress, and a lot of it is because of President Trump. He's been slashing regulations like crazy, right? I read it was like 22 regulations gone for every new one. This is huge. It's been a big boon to our economy. And he's been exposing the deep state. He calls it the criminal deep state. This is also huge, right? Some of the stuff that we've been saying for 60 years, if you had said it to a room full of Bush Republicans a few years ago, they would, oh, there goes those John Birchers with their tinfoil hats. Now, I know because I've been doing it. I've been going around in Florida talking to Trump clubs, talking to Republican clubs. They believe it, and they know that it's true, and it's because Trump has paved the way. This is huge. So let's look real quick at some of these. Can anybody give me a time count, since I'm sure that clock back there is wrong? 11:28. Oh, that's the actual time. Okay, so what time do I finish? 11:29. All right. 11:50? Oh, 11:50. Okay, wonderful. So the Trans-Pacific Partnership. This has been at the top of the JBS agenda. It was for a very long time, right? If you guys read your bulletins regularly, you know that this is a very bad deal. Unfortunately, after he withdrew from it, now we've gotten some of this snuck back into NAFTA. So very, very bad news. But this new NAFTA is not necessarily a foregone conclusion. And while withdrawing from the TPP, he gave us some huge opportunities, using his own words, to show people how dangerous these are. He gave a speech, for example, I think it was in Vietnam, where he exposed the danger of these multilateral free trade agreements. He said they surrender our sovereignty. We can't govern ourselves properly if we enter into these multilateral trade deals. That's why we want to do bilateral trade deals. That was huge, right? I mean, the fact that the president is saying these things makes our job so much easier, right? We're no longer, the fringe, right? Now the president is saying the same thing we're saying. This helps us a lot in our mission of educating the American people. The UN Paris Agreement, right? I was at this UN Paris conference, unbelievable thing. Crazy. And what this agreement essentially would have done was it would have built the foundation of a global environmental regime. It would have transferred our jobs and our productive capacity to China and to India and to other countries. It would have completely hollowed out the American economy, and it would have created the structures necessary to govern the lives of every person on this planet, right? They're literally saying that the gas you exhale is a toxic pollution that needs to be taxed and regulated by the United Nations. Obama tried to impose this on us without even getting Senate confirmation. He said it's an executive agreement, so we don't need permission from the Senate to ratify this treaty. That's ludicrous, and Trump has said we're going to be getting out of this. We're not out of it yet. We're not out of the woods. A lot of pro-Trump people are saying he got us out. He didn't do it yet, but he did send the warning to them, said we're going to get out. Inside this agreement, there's a clause that says you have to wait 4 years after you give notice to leave. If I were Trump, I would have said, I laugh at your clause. We never ratified this. Obama signed it. It's meaningless. But he didn't do that, unfortunately. He gave the 4-year notice, and let's hope that if he wins the next election, he follows through on this, and we're out of the Paris Agreement. That'll be very, very important, and we need to keep up the pressure on this. The globalists are not done yet. Assuming the UN gives me the credentials, I will be at the next UN Global Warming Summit. It's going to be in Poland, believe it or not. And so that'll be a lot of fun. I'll get to hang out with my Polish friends, who I just love Poland. I can't say enough about it. And we'll get to be exposing these globalists and their war on humanity. So that'll be fun. UNESCO. UNESCO is another one of these crucial institutions for this agenda of world government, right? Because you can't have a totalitarian world government unless you've brainwashed enough of the global population. UNESCO, the UN Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization, is basically the lead player on the global stage for brainwashing humanity. If you read their documents, they tell you what their agenda is. Actually, just until very recently, they had an actual communist running it. Her name was Irina Bokova. We did a lot of work exposing her in the New American, and I've heard from reliable sources that our work was the contributing factor in ensuring that she did not become the Secretary General of the UN. They just put a regular old socialist in place instead, which it could have been worse. But anyways, Trump has announced that we're leaving UNESCO. That's huge. Now, Betsy DeVos is still running around promising that we're going to continue implementing these things, but exiting UNESCO would be huge. Now, we're not out of the UN yet, which would be nice, but exiting their brainwashing program would be a very huge step forward. These are the people who want 5-year-olds to be indoctrinated with global standards into the LGBT agenda. That is exactly what they say in their own documents. You can read it on their website. They go around the world bragging about how they're going to change the values, attitudes, and beliefs of your children to become green, global citizens. So Trump getting us out of this is a very big deal. That's supposed to happen at the end of 2018. A lot of foreign governments and the UN are doing everything they can to get him to rescind his decision, but so far he's standing firm, and that's very good. We got out of the UN Human Rights Council, right? If you read the New American, you know we've been exposing these people for a very long time. It's basically a dictators club where they're trying to redefine the understanding of rights, right? In America, we understand rights they come from God, right? And they are unalienable or inalienable, depending on how you like to say the word. this is really big. The UN says, no, no, no. Human rights are granted by governments, granted by international agreements. They include things like a good brainwashing or a good education. They include things like food and like water, right? So these are not rights as we as Americans have historically understood them. Freedom from government coercion in terms of what we say and how we worship God, and our right to keep and bear arms. They have actually argued that our right to keep and bear arms is a human rights violation. So there you go. Trump has withdrawn us from this. That was a great move. It completely discredited this body on the world stage. It is now a laughingstock, and now Cuba and China can talk about how great each other's human rights records are without our money, right? So that's nice. The UN Relief and Works Agency. This is another one of these UN bureaucracies that exists to constantly hammer on sovereignty, waste money, promote globalism, brainwash children. And Trump finally said, enough of that. We're leaving. We're exiting. No more. You have the UN Migration Compact. This was a huge UN initiative that Obama was a big fan of. This was going to globalize migration policy. So no longer would Congress and our federal government set our immigration policy. Our immigration policy would be set by the United Nations. What do you think our immigration policy would be? Open your borders, right? And everybody must come in. It's got to be at taxpayer expense. You've got to give them food and housing and clothing and education and all the rest of it, right? So Trump said, no, that's not compatible with our sovereignty. We're leaving. And that was the end of that. And that gave cover to other governments to also say, no, sorry, we're not doing that, right? I was just in Hungary a couple weeks ago, had an opportunity to interview the Secretary of State for Public Diplomacy. And, this is another big point that they're on, right? We are not going to accept the UN flooding our countries with people from alien cultures who don't speak our language, who have no interest in becoming Americans or Hungarians or whatever it is. The mass migration agenda is a crucial part of the deep state. So if you get the Deep State in Action special issue, you'll see this is a crucial component of their war on national sovereignty, in their war on our liberties, in their war on our Christian civilization, on our Western Christian civilization. Without this, it becomes much harder for them to succeed. So Trump standing up to this is huge. And again, very, very important stuff happening. The International Criminal Court. Right. The U.S. government has never technically signed up, although we did try to get everybody else to sign up. And now the Trump administration has openly mocked these people on the global stage. They said, if you try to take an American before your court, we're going to prosecute you. We're going to freeze your assets. Try it. Right. So that was good. Their little global court can now do whatever it wants without the participation of Americans, without jurisdiction over Americans. And so this is all happening under the Trump administration. This is good news for people who don't like globalism. Now, obviously, the deep state is not just going to say, oh, okay, you can blow up our world order and we're just going to sit back and enjoy it, right? So they're not going to do that. They're going to do everything they can to try to stop this process. So they thought they were going to use this character here as their Trump card. And, he's brought down a lot of Trump's key people. Mike Flynn, for example. There's a couple positions in the administration that are absolutely key. And the National Security Advisor is one of those positions. I mean, they have massive leeway over incredibly important policies on how our federal government operates. So Mike Flynn, who I consider to be a patriot, he was not a member of the CFR, unlike so many of these others. He was the head of the Defense Intelligence Agency, and he went on international television and said, hey, I told the Obama administration it was a really dumb idea to give aid and weapons to Islamic terrorists in Syria to overthrow a foreign government, and they did it anyway. Right? So, I mean, this was like a nuclear bomb of truth dropped on the Obama administration. A person who was affiliated with the deep state, which is trying to do all these machinations, would not have done that, would not have said those things in public. So Mike Flynn was a good guy. That's why they had to take him down. Paul Manafort, whether he's a good guy or not, I don't know, but he ran Trump's campaign very successfully, got Trump put into the White House, and so they had to take him down too, on things that had absolutely nothing to do with Russia collusion, right? Apparently he didn't cross all his I's and dot all his T's, or however that goes, on his taxes, like years ago, right? And so now they said, well, we're going to bring you down for that, the special counsel. And they did, right? They got him convicted. Anybody could be next, right? I mean, this is almost self-evident. I think most of the people in this room realize that. They asked, a member of Congress asked the Congressional Research Service, how many federal regulations do we have with criminal penalties attached, right? They could send you to jail for violating them. Said, we actually don't have the manpower or the resources to figure out that number. There are so many federal regulations with criminal penalties attached that everybody in this room could be convicted and be put in jail for violating them. Some of them you would never imagine, right? Having your dog on a leash that's more than 6 feet long and within 200 feet of federal property, right? Signing a check that's for less than $1, right? All kinds of things that you would never imagine in a million years. And so what they've done is they've made every American into a criminal. Liberal attorneys have written about this. Here's a book by Harvey Silvergate, 3 felonies a day. He argues that the average American who goes out and does their business commits about 3 felonies per day. That's every one of us. And that doesn't mean every one of us is going to be prosecuted, but that means that if we became a real threat as individuals to the deep state, they could very, very easily, they have all your emails, they have all your phone calls, they know everything about you in these NSA warehouses that they've been spying on all your information. They could go back and they could say, hey, you didn't do your taxes perfectly in 2012 and you're affiliated with Trump, so we don't like you, so we're going to put you on trial. So there is a big risk that more of Trump's inner circle could go down. I think this is partly an intimidation tactic too, right? Who wants to go work for Trump when you know this could be coming, right? I mean, would you? That's a terrifying prospect. They're even going after his attorneys, and that's wild stuff. Law professor John Baker from Louisiana. There's no one in the United States over the age of 18 who could not be indicted for some federal crime. The overwhelming majority of these regulations don't have what's called mens rea protection. So you don't even have to willfully violate these regulations. If you dig a hole on your property that wasn't in compliance with some obscure EPA rule, they could throw you in prison, right? So these people don't play around. And they're probably not going to come after most of us. But if we became a threat to their little New World Order, they could. So there's that danger. Then we have another danger. Right? And there's a lot of dangers out there. We are not out of the woods by any means. I know a lot of people thought that Trump got elected, hey, we can just go back to sleep. Everything's fine. Everything's taken care of. The New World Order is done for. Globalists are done for. Forget it, right? That's not going to happen. And members of the John Birch Society know that better than anyone. This is going to be a long struggle, if not perpetual struggle, until it all comes to an end. But one possibility, and we've written about this in the New American, several very intelligent people have even talked about the possibility of this happening, including Ron Paul, by the way, who spoke at our 50th, he was the keynote speaker at our 50th anniversary event 10 years ago. I know some of you were there. I was there. It was an awesome thing. And he said, hey, these people could collapse the U.S. dollar, they could collapse the U.S. economy, and they could blame it on Trump. They could say, see what happens when you aren't a globalist, when you try to pursue an America First policy, when you decrease taxes and cut regulations, then everything goes crazy. And that's exactly what they would do, right? If they destroyed the dollar, they wouldn't say, oh, yeah, we globalists did that by manipulating your currency through the Federal Reserve. They'd say that fool Trump did it, and those conservatives who elected him did it by refusing to be part of the globalist agenda. So that's a big risk. Right? I don't know if any of you guys watched The Simpsons. I don't recommend it. It's not very good humor. But they actually ran an episode in 2000, believe it or not, where a President Trump became president and completely destroyed the economy. And then Lisa Simpson, dressed as a fancy Hillary Clinton type woman, had to come in and clean up the mess that the evil President Trump had created of the economy. So, that is not an out-of-the-question scenario, right? If they pull the plug on the dollar, and they could do that very easily. You guys all know how the Federal Reserve works. You all know the U.S. dollar as the global reserve currency. That status could be yanked tomorrow, right? Very, very easily. And then they could blame Trump and Trump's supporters for this. So we need to be on guard for that, right? And it's a very real possibility. Then there is, an agenda we've talked about for a long time. I don't have a slide about it. But China, and this is becoming a globalist narrative right this instant. They're saying, well, because Trump is withdrawing from these globalist organizations, it is setting the stage for the communist Chinese dictatorship to take over the architecture of global governance. Now, if you guys read the New American Magazine regularly, we had a cover story on this issue years ago saying China was staking a claim in the New World Order and that the globalists in the United States, what we call the deep state today, was completely behind it at every step of the way. Right? You have George Soros running around while he's getting his Globalist of the Year award, and yes, that's a real award, and yes, Soros really got it, saying that China needs to own the New World Order in the same way that the United States owned the previous world order. So you have David Rockefeller, went over there in 1973, came back and wrote in the New York Times that the social experiment under Chairman Mao is the most successful and the most important in all of human history. So they've been grooming and those of you who have been Birchers long enough and who've read enough books know that the CFR and their minions and subversives and traitors within the U.S. government actually brought the Chinese communists to power in the first place. They betrayed Chiang Kai-shek, our ally, and put the Chinese communists in power. They said he was an agrarian reformer, right? He just wants to change the unfair system in China. Isn't that nice? So The globalists have been behind the rise of China, and we exposed this many years before Trump was even on the radar. And now they're saying, oh, look, see, now China's taking over the UN and Interpol and the World Bank and the IMF and all these things because mean old Trump and his dumb supporters don't like the world order that America built. That's an absolute lie. They've been planning this for a very long time, and now they're trying to make it look like it was Trump's fault. It wasn't Trump's fault. They've been orchestrating this for decades. And so that's another risk, right? That they could just go ahead, pull the plug on the dollar, harm America very seriously, have China officially take the reins of the global governance, as they like to call it. And they've been pretty open about this. You know, the dictator of China went to the World Economic Forum, one of the top globalist forums of the year, and said, we need to preserve the New World Order. We need to save globalism from certain presidents who won't be named, right? Everybody knew who he was talking about. So this is the new narrative now, right? Trump is trying to destroy the world order. Now we need the EU and China to join forces to keep it all together. So these are all very real risks, and we in the John Birch Society know that our work is not going to be done just because a president who may or may not be what we hope he is has taken the reins of power. So my conclusion here, and you're obviously welcome to draw your own, this is just my opinion, but my conclusion here is that Trump is not an agent of the deep state. They did not plan for him to win the election, and something happened, right? They were sure that Hillary was going to become the next president and put the final nails in the coffin. And this is my opinion. Why do I think this? Because of some of the evidence that I presented, because of how sure they were that Hillary was going to win. I think what happened is, you know, Trump said millions of people voted illegally. I'm almost positive that he's correct. I think that they miscalculated. I don't think they realized the massive surge of support that Trump was going to have on this anti-globalist platform, thanks to the hard work of the JBS over 60 years. So that's what I think. If we had gotten Hillary Clinton or just about any one of the Republican rivals, right? Imagine Jeb Bush, right? Do you think, what would he have done? He would have full speed ahead towards globalism, right? And they would have put the final nails in the coffin of American sovereignty, of American liberty, of our Constitution. So I think that's what would have happened. So now you have them calling Trump a traitor, right? John Brennan, the guy who bragged in 2016, he voted for the communists before getting his top security clearance at the CIA and then taking over the CIA. Trump is the traitor, right? Okay, all right. And so I think at worst, you know, assuming Trump is not who we want him to be, then we have a reprieve here, right? We maybe have some more time to educate enough Americans on what we're facing and get this house back in order. Because we know that unless we educate the electorate, we're never going to win this battle. We're going to lose. So we have to get the American people educated. And so I think in a worst-case scenario, we have a little bit of extra time now to educate Americans. And we have somebody in the White House saying, in many cases, the same things we've been saying for 60 years. Did anybody get a chance to hear his speech at the United Nations General Assembly the other day? That was amazing, right? There was a few things that we would quibble with, of course, you know, but hey, we reject the ideology of globalism. We do too, right? America's going to be governed by Americans, right? We're not going to tell other countries what to do, and in exchange, they can leave us alone and they won't tell us what to do. That's what we've been saying for 60 years. Why is that so hard? So before, we were on the outside saying that, and people said, oh, well, you know, you guys are just nuts. Well, now the guy in the White House is saying the same thing. So this gives us an incredible opportunity to educate local Republican leaders, local opinion molders, local radio hosts, who even just a few years ago wouldn't have had anything to do with us. This is very, very welcome news, in my opinion. At best, we have a potential ally in the White House, not on everything, right? Trump is not a constitutionalist. I'm not going to argue to you that Trump is a constitutionalist. He's not. But I think he's sincere in his opposition to globalism. And that is huge right now because globalism is an existential threat to the survival of our country. Trump understands so many of these things. He understands the Federal Reserve. On the campaign trail, he talked about how the Federal Reserve was manipulating the economy, how we'd be better off under a gold standard. He knows these things. He can't run around necessarily saying them because of what CNN and Fox News and all that. Oh, he's totally nuts. We've got to remove him under the 25th Amendment. But he knows these things. I know at least two Birchers who have had experiences, opportunities to meet him, who tells me he knows all of this. He knows all about the New World Order, what they're planning, and he opposes it. But of course, he's fighting his own administration. He's fighting the media. He's fighting the dummies out in the streets rioting and burning things. So he's got a lot of opposition. And so at best, we have a potential ally in the White House. And even though he may not be everything we would wish for, we have a very serious opportunity to at least hold back the globalists for some time longer, whether that's a few years or a few decades, I don't know. It probably depends a lot on what the people in this room and the people back home who couldn't make it end up doing with their time and with their resources and with their energies. You know, the John Birch Society really has held back the tide of this for 60 years. A lot of people don't realize that. Even a lot of Birchers don't realize that. It is because of the John Birch Society that America is still as free as it is today. So we have an enormous responsibility on our shoulders, and we have an incredible opportunity to get a lot done. So what we need to do, we need to keep birching, right? We need to keep birching. Go home and birch harder than you've ever birched before, right? We got to keep exposing the insiders. You know, now they're called the deep state. 75% of Americans say they're concerned about the deep state in the Monmouth poll. That is because of the John Birch Society and because Trump has taken parts of our message, at least, to a national audience. 75% of Americans. That means 3 out of 4 of the people you know, at least, are concerned about the deep state just like we are. We have the opportunity, we have the resources, we have the special issues in the books to give them a clearer picture of what the deep state is. So, even if Trump is everything we hope, he obviously can't do it alone. And that doesn't mean we all need to go out there and become Trump partisans, right? And say Trump is right all the time. That's not the role of the John Birch Society, right? Our role is to educate the American people. But we need to go out there and we need to make sure the American people understand that globalism is a major threat, that we need to respect the Constitution, and with God's help, we need to keep working for less government, more responsibility, and a better world. Thank you guys very much. God bless America, and God bless the John Birch Society.